And an overview, I'm going to be talking about, let me get my notes out, Weston Price and what he found through his own personal experience, as well as through the research he did across the globe with primitive societies. And then how we can apply the 11 common factors that he found in his studies to our life today. And to me, that's fundamental to building community and to taking power away from the mega corporations that now are trying to control everything. I look back and I think that the Hunger Games was really a premonition and a much too accurate description of what's going on. So now for the details. Weston Price was born in 1870 in Ontario, and he studied dentistry at the University of Michigan, graduating in 1893. He then went to North Dakota, set himself up in medical practice, and very soon thereafter, he found himself unable to practice. He had typhoid fever, and his teeth were falling apart, and it was not a good beginning for a dentist. So basically, it was a very short story. His brother said, come home to the family farm. He recovered. He drank raw milk. He ate the food that was grown on the farm and recovered. And then in the spring, another relative, older male in the family, said, come on, we're going to go camping in the woods. And I have this image of, hey, bro, let's go camping. So they lived in the woods, hunting, eating nuts and berries and twigs and things like that. And not only did he recover, he became much more robust. And he found that the decay in his teeth not only stopped, but there were some of the caries that had started to heal themselves. Very interesting. He and his wife had a son, and he ended up giving the son a root canal, and not long thereafter, his son died of that, which was quite a tragic experience. I've had a hard time ferreting out the details of his biography, but the next step is that he then set himself up about 1910 in Cleveland, Ohio, with a dental practice. And he was very successful. He had a laboratory connected with his practice, and he observed very carefully, took meticulous notes, and noticed that there was a common pattern of dental condition as well as overall health across his patients. And he started asking questions and observing, and realized that people who ate certain things, he could count on seeing them several times a year. And other people who ate other things, he knew, all right, they'll be back, but we'll just say, yeah, you're doing fine, carry on. He was very active in the dental societies. He authored numerous papers and textbooks. He did a monumental study on root canals and their effects, strongly motivated by his own experience with his son. In the 1930s, there was a worldwide depression. He set up in his clinic a daily meal for the children in the community. And they came in once a day, 7 days a week, for weeks, and it went on for months. Again, he took photographs, careful notes, and paid very careful attention to what happened. And at the end of the stretch of time for his various patients, he noted that the dental caries that they had started with stopped where they had been, and again, in some places, went back to a healthier condition. Probably he found that some healed entirely. There are stories of one boy who could barely walk the couple of blocks to go from home into the clinic, and sometimes he had to be carried. And after a few months, this kid's out there shooting hoops and whizzing around the basketball court and in great shape. So that made a difference. And then there was another child who was reputed to be the hellion, the child that, oh, please don't put him in my class. And after a few months, some of the instructors at the school, this really touches me, called the school and they said, "What's going on with this kid?" And he said, "Well, he's been eating at my clinic 1 day a week." And they said, "Well, he used to be awful to have in class, rude, disruptive, bottom of the academic efforts and so on like that. He's doing beautifully, he's learning effectively, he's getting along with his peers, and he's polite. It's a delight to have him in the class." And I happen to have a friend who raises foster children, and she uses similar practices with her children to the point where the foster child system, she's in Georgia, I think, no, Florida. The foster child system has contacted her to say, "What are you doing with these kids?" So other people are noticing that it makes a difference, and it's also a testimony that one person can make a difference through what he or she does. Among the foods that he fed his children, I need to blink across on this. It was fresh, unadulterated, local food. It included nutrient-dense meat stews with the organs. I know liver was something that was served on a regular basis. My husband's heritage had kidney pie, but now that's not common on the menu, unless you go to other cuisines. It included raw milk and a lot of butter. It included cod liver oil mixed with butter oil. It included freshly ground breads. And I suspect that there's something about grains. You have to pre-digest them to get the most out of them. So I suspect that there was more to it than simply they made a loaf of bread every day. And then it included also fresh squeezed orange juice or tomato juice. 1 meal a day with these simple ingredients. And those are the results he got. And I've already mentioned these factors. So, with the Depression in the 1930s, and Weston Price was in his 60s about this time, he said to his wife, "Come on, Flo, let's go camping." And he traveled literally to all parts of the world. Word had been getting around that there were some primitive societies who ate their own food locally grown, and that they had magnificent health. So he set out wondering, what did they eat, and how was their health really? And another question at the back of his mind was, were they vegetarians? So they took off. That's a 1930s airplane. Probably had to sit inside and pedal to keep it going. And he traveled all over the world. He went to the Arctic, spoke with the Inuit. He was all over North America, the Southwest, the Seminole in Florida, farther north in Canada. He went to the Hebrides Islands off Scotland, where it's cold and gray and wet and cold all the time. And to the Alpine valleys in the Alps, to Africa, the Maasai and some neighboring tribes, to Peru, and to the South Sea Islands, as well as Australia and New Zealand. He visited a total of 23 places. His book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, covers 14 of these societies carefully. And then the additional notes that are not in the book add some further details. So he did not go as a tourist, because a lot of people say, oh, he was just a spectator, and they try to invalidate his research. He went as a researcher. He took interpreters with him where appropriate, and he stayed living the way they live for quite a while. Come on in, welcome. He took 15,000 pictures, which, if you think about photography in the 1930s, that was a matter of blink it and then carefully process it. Yeah, that was not a casual, it's not like digital photography as we have nowadays. And lived in recognition of the mantra, if you come to help us, please go away. You don't waste your time, don't waste ours. If you have come to share our human life experience, you are welcome. And to me, that's a healthy attitude to participate. And I had another note in here on this. Yeah. All right, this was also a time of the transition between farming that was done by horse and plow and the mechanization bringing tractors in and petroleum dependence. All across these different places, they ate different things. In the Hebrides, they ate codfish, especially the heads and the livers, stuffed with oatmeal. In the Lurchental Alpine Valley, there were children wading in icy streams barefoot, the kind that every mother says, put a coat on. And they ate raw milk, cheese, and butter from cows that grazed on the mountain slopes, and they also ate thick sourdough rye that was lathered with butter. They had green slime on their teeth, but no cavities, which should raise the question of, is it really that important to brush? Is that the answer? In the Arctic Circle, the people ate a diet that was 80% fat. Take that, USDA, with your, oh my God, don't increase it over 30%. And the fat came from whale blubber, seal oil. The growing season is short, so they did not eat a lot of veggies, and most of it was dried. In the Maasai, in Africa, you had sturdy, proud, tall people, and they drank raw blood and raw milk and a few vegetables. There was a vegetarian community in the area, and they same geographical terrain, and they were significantly smaller and certainly less robust. And then he went to the South Sea Islands, Australia, New Zealand. I mentioned that. Occasionally, when he would ask a question, there would be a hesitation about answering him. And people would disappear for a couple hours or a day or two, and they'd come back and they would give an answer. And he would say, well, why couldn't you tell me right away? And they said, you are not like the other white men who have come here. The other white men who have come to our community want to tell us to adopt their ways. You have come to learn from us, and I think that's significant. So he examined mouths in everybody. This is some of the people lined up. The woman on the far right is from the Hebrides. I'm not sure about the others, but you can see that they have solid, big teeth. They're opaque. They've got a lot of good mineral in them. They smile. They've got broad dental arches. Their teeth are not crowded. The face reflects what's going on in the rest of the body. So if you've got a broad dental arch, or a woman, you've got a good broad pelvis, so childbirth is easy. And indeed, among the Inuit in the Arctic, when a woman was going to give birth, basically she'd kind of move over to the other side of the igloo at night and in the morning introduce the baby to the family. It wasn't a matter of days of, I don't know if I can live through this. It was a natural process. The other thing that he noted, that there were no overbites, and there was no collapse in the middle third of the face. There are a lot of people whose faces tend to just kind of fall flat. And he found that that was due to lack of fat-soluble vitamins in general, specifically vitamin K2. But to say that any individual nutrient is responsible for everything is like saying it's that violinist, that's the one that's making this symphony so good. It doesn't work that way. They grew what they ate. They ate what they grew. Occasionally there was some trading, but basically these were isolated places. In some instances, people had gone into the city and eaten foods of commerce and had children there. And they came back and the women said, oh, childbirth was so terrible and my child's teeth are terrible. And sometimes the behavior was terrible too. And then when they were put back on real food, it changed. My teeth are a disaster. My children, who were raised according to these principles, have gorgeous teeth. So I've seen it firsthand that it can make a difference. They preserved their food because they had no electricity or other refrigeration. They preserved their foods by drying and salting and lacto-fermentation. Their soil was, for the most part, humus and microbe rich, except for the people on the Hebrides, where the soil itself was not too good, but they took the smoke-filled thatched roofs from their huts, which they renewed every year, and worked them into the ground, and that provided fertility as well. The common factor among the diets on all of these 14 societies and more that he studied had 10 times the amount of fat-soluble vitamins. That's vitamins A, D, K2, and E than are recommended in the standard American diet. And they had 4 times the amount of water-soluble vitamins. Those are the C complex and the B complex. The only successful vegetarians that he found were, as I mentioned earlier, in Africa, they were smaller stature, and they tended to be dominated by the more vigorous neighbors. And in one of the South Sea islands, they had the inland tribes where the soil was terrible, and they were mostly vegetarian. And then you had the coastal tribes, which did a lot of fishing, ate seafood and shellfish, things like that. And eggs. Fish eggs, duck eggs, turkey eggs, bird eggs, probably snake eggs too, if you could find them. So on this South Sea island, the people vegetarians who lived inland, knew that they needed something. So a couple of times a year, they would come down to the coast, and there were some conflicts. But finally, the coastal folks realized that it would literally save their lives to, here, use our nets, use our tools, let them gather up what they needed from the sea. Because if they didn't, the inland vegetarians became cannibals. Definitely an incentive to learn some conflict management. Among the common factors, one that I'd like to emphasize is that they ate a minimum of 30% animal fats and up to 30 in the very cold climates. Now, the FDA recommendation for the standard American diet for fats is a maximum of 30, and they emphasize the polyunsaturated fatty acids, the vegetable oils. The traditional healthy diet contained only 4 to 7% of the polyunsaturated, and the rest of it was natural, good old saturated and monounsaturated animal fat. And no vegetable oils. I have this image of God and Adam sitting there in the Garden of Eden, and God is saying, look at all these wonderful things I have given you to eat. But wait, you can't eat the fat. That has to come from a factory. I don't think that's the way the book was written. And incidentally, modern diseases have increased in their incidence as people have increased the amount of vegetable oils in their diets. So here are some pictures of animal fats. That's lamb, which is a good fatty meat. And then for food preservation, they did lactofermentation. From left on the side, that's lacto-fermented carrots with ginger. That's a creme fraiche. That's beet kvass. This is natto, which is a Japanese dish made from fermented soybeans. It is an acquired taste. When I was teaching in Atlanta, I would have lunch in a nearby Japanese restaurant, and the waitress would look at this very non-Japanese face and say, "You not like natto? You really want natto?" And I loved it. It's nourishing. It is the only vegetarian source of vitamin K2, apparently. So then we have some kimchi and some sauerkraut. The natural probiotic foods are crucial. So what were the primitive societies missing? They had no blatant chemical fertilizers. They didn't need pesticides. They didn't have GMOs. They didn't have glyphosate. They didn't use vegetable oils. They didn't can their food. They didn't irradiate it. They didn't use microwaves. They didn't have snacks. They didn't have oven-ready or microwave-ready foods. And they did not have oceans of plastic waste around them. Exactly, and they didn't have vaccines either. It was natural, kind of, you get exposed to something and your God-given immune system responds appropriately. So it was, they didn't have courthouses, they did not have jails. These and medical palaces were not the center of the community. They did subsistence farming. Now, subsistence farming is often dismissed as, oh, that's so old-fashioned and so inefficient. Going to come back to that. The mega corporations in the 60s and since then sent representatives to communities where there was subsistence farming. And they sweet-talked them and they said, come, just put away your old obsolete, outdated methods. Come grow commodities for us. And then you can sell the commodities and you'll have money and you'll be able to have a nice big house and send your children away to school, not knowing what sending your children away to school really entailed. And you'll be able to take vacations and it'll be so much easier. And what they were not told is, if you do as we say, you will lose your autonomy. You will be up to your eyeballs in debt. We will tell you how to function and what to do and when. You will depend on external corporate requirements and the machinery that we tell you you have to use, and fertilizers, and then the pesticides and the petroleum dependency. And most of the wars that the United States gets engaged in is basically a matter of, why is our oil under their soil? What they also didn't say is that to do that would destroy your soil. It would deplete the microbes, the humus, the fertility. It would deplete the nutrient content of the food, leading to disease. And it would disrupt and destroy the community customs and the family life. Incidentally, in Africa, because the weeds were destroyed by herbicides, vegetables that had been a significant, but perhaps not well publicized part of the local diet were eliminated, and that included a lot of dark green leafy veggies. Dark green leafy veggies do not contain vitamin A. Vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin, but they contain carotenoids and other things that are precursors. And when people did not have these precursors to vitamin A, they became vitamin A deficient. So when all the vaccine pushers say, oh my goodness, if you don't vaccinate, people are going to they're going to get measles and the world will come to a screeching halt. What they're leaving out is that, yes, this happens in people who are vitamin A deficient because you've trashed their agriculture and you've trashed their way of living. So people shifted to production for profit, which entails elaborate marketing, and it squeezes out the small operator. The free market is not a level playing field for the small operator. The regulations are geared to make it easy for the mega corporation that can hire one lawyer and not for the little guy. Farm to Consumer Legal Defense is not here at this, but I have information about them at my booth. And something that really chafed me was an interview with somebody who was a marketeer for these big corporations. And when somebody asked her if she ate the junk foods that she marketed, and she said, oh no, I go to the gourmet shop. I don't eat that. Speaking of lack of integrity. But what has happened is that technology is no longer the servant of the people. The people have become the servants, the slaves to the technology. There's more to say about that, but that's enough. We have become slaves to the mega corporations. And of course we have inequality between the 1% and the 99. So I've caught up. Okay, we've done that. And so the foods of commerce, basically all the same basic ingredients: wheat, soy, corn, whatever else, cottonseed meal. Cottonseed meal is not grown, cottonseed is grown as part of cotton. Oh, but then it's a convenient leftover. So we'll put that in food, but it's not subject to the same regulations that food crops are grown. It's a mess. Basically, it's all empty calories. And I like to live by the mantra that when you buy something, you're buying something for yourself, and you are supporting somebody else's efforts. And I hope that what you're supporting matches the values that are important to you. You vote with your dollars. So this is a mega farm. The problem is not cow farts, and I need to realign that. Okay, there's an old ethnic joke going back several decades. How many people does it take to change a light bulb? 4. You have one person to hold the bulb, and then the other 3 people to hold the chair and turn the chair around while the person holding the light bulb. So basically, modern agriculture, especially with animals, has become a variation of that bad joke. Instead of having the animals go to the food, we have people bringing the food to the animals. Seems rather screwy. So animals that provide the meat and the milk and the eggs to us today are still confined. So-called free-range chickens simply mean that, or cage-free chickens, means that they're still up to their butts in poop, and they are confined in close places, and they don't see the sun. The problem is not that cows are flatulent. The problem is that cows are not on grass. And the crappy food that they are given changes their gut flora, it changes their metabolism, it changes the flavor of the meat, and it goes downhill from there. I think if we were to put animals back on grass, it would solve most of our problems with respect to the environment, health, and economic stability as well. So we have loss of diversity, we have environmental disasters, we have reduced nutrition, we have loss of autonomy and indebtedness, servitude, and we have an economy that is dependent on adversity. It's based on sickness, war, and prisons. The prisons for profit are another obscene situation. And then with this, of course, we chop down the hedgerows and the forests, and then without the forests and the grass to hold the water, to maintain the soil, to block the wind, to hold the moisture, we end up with violent tornadoes. We end up without the adequate soil, water in the soil. Then we end up with forest fires that are out of control, and it goes downhill from there. We are feeding an insatiable machine. We've made a tool and a system that we are now slaves to. It is not here to help us. And it's time to change that, to restore humanity. Because all of that is a deal with a devil. My daughter made these drawings for me. And you can see the work is done on the farms, and all the money goes to the cities. We don't know what we have bought into. We have been lured away from our inner truth, from our integrity, and asked to deny our deeper awareness and our inner selves. And it really chafes me. There's a church where I go to a choral rehearsal in that has a big thing about, you're doing a service by persuading your neighbors and family to get vaxxed. And to me, any organization, any belief that puts guilt, shame, and putting somebody else down, that's dishonest, it's sick. So, we have farming for food. In old-fashioned agriculture, the herbivores ate grass, they moved to follow the food, and animals were an integral part of a healthy farm system. The cow eats grass, it's converted in multiple stomachs, interestingly enough, to saturated fat, which the cow then uses to run its metabolism. And no surprise that a cow is a sacred food, or the sacred animal, because it provides food in the form of milk, eventually meat. It provides manure, which is fabulous fertility for the soil. You can also burn clumps of dried manure for fuel. And then when it's finally gone, you boil the bones for soup, and you use the leather for hides. So here's a biodynamic farm. And it is a healthy, vibrant place, and there's variety. And it is run by human beings who actually they go out and they feed their souls while they're working the earth. And then they have time to sit around and do music and talk to each other and do other things in the rest of the day. So my take on this is that lasting freedom is not simply a matter of doing whatever the hell you want, but it entails responsibility. Real freedom is having the capacity to know what is right. And you know that it's right because you know that it fits in the context. And then it's having the physical ability and the know-how to be able to do it. It's not just, I don't feel like it. It becomes a matter of your own personal human development. And that comes from working with the forces of nature, not without regard to them. So what do? Grow your own food. This is my back porch a couple of weeks ago. There, in 6 square feet, I have beans, tomatoes, 2 kinds of basil, garlic, parsley, flowers, and I had strawberries there a little bit earlier, and spinach. Buy your food locally. That's my farmer. I love it when he says, I grow soil, and then I get these amazing, wonderful vegetables, and I can taste the difference, and there's better keeping quality in his vegetables because he grows soil. I'm going to blitz through because we're running short on time. In industrial agriculture, locals get to do the work and the corporate system gets the money. And my guess is the people who take that money haven't a clue about different types of cabbages or different types of potatoes or a different type of any vegetable. The money stays in the community. And when you buy from your farmer, oh, how are you this week? How's the grandchild? How's that project you were coming along? You interact and you relate to each other. And then he says, yeah, I'm looking for, oh, I know somebody who does that. Or I know somebody who's got a whatever that he needs to move on. So this is how you build community. And the money that I give him stays in the community. It's not that a small portion stays to the guy who's selling it and the rest gets filtered off to the big corporations. The money stays in the community. And when you do that, you build strength, you build relationships, and you build resilience. Local food is fresher because it's picked more recently, and it can be picked to specification. I talk to my guy on a regular basis, and I say, next week I'm going to need 20 pounds of cabbage. I'm making sauerkraut, and that works. Better taste, better keeping quality, and when you eat healthy food, you are healthier, your mind is more clear, you're not in a constant state of irritation, so you're less likely to squabble with people, and that's good. You also know the growing conditions. I asked one of the guys at my farmer's market, what do you do for your soil? And he looked at me blankly with, why would I do anything for my soil? And I knew that his organic claim, keep moving, go back to my other guy. So it's an investment in community well-being. It's participation. I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks. That sort of thing. And it is a human-to-human relationship, and it builds trust. And when you trust people, it's possible to have a relationship. If there's no trust, especially if there's secrecy, I'm not going to tell you what's in that. That doesn't work. It builds suspicion. If something goes wrong in a central supply system, such as we have now, something goes wrong in California, we are all screwed. If something goes wrong locally, if frost hits things, well, his neighbor down the way may have a different sort of greenhouse or set up like that. And there's mutual aid. There's, I don't have it this week, but so-and-so has it. And again, it builds the network, it builds the connections. In a network of autonomous production, there's more room for shared support. My dad was a fireman, and there was mutual aid. If the small department in the small village I grew up in had a fire bigger than it could handle, you'd call in the neighbors, and it was a mutual respect. And having a smaller scale situation is economically more sound, because you don't you don't go into debt to buy it. You don't pour fortunes and a lot of effort into building this great whatever it is, and then you've become a slave to it because you've got to justify having it. That's how pasteurization came in. A lot of money was put into pasteurizing milk, buying the machinery, setting up the networks, and now we have to justify it and pretend that that's the way to go, because nobody wants to say, hey, we spent all this money and we're not using it. So, human beings were meant to interact, and the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. That's another illustration by one wonderful daughter, in contrast to my other daughter, who is also wonderful. So, local regenerative agriculture feeds people and it promotes health. It fosters relationship, and through those relationships, it builds community. And it fosters local autonomy. Yes, there may be a season when you manage mostly on the food you've grown. Meanwhile, your neighbor is managing on a different set of veggies, and then you get together and say, you know, I'll trade you some of my beans for your cauliflower. And the bumper sticker on my car reads, peace begins when the hungry are fed. When people have enough, but not an excess, they are more easily in balance. And when you have a balance between your physical body and your inner spiritual life, you are a more whole human being. You can take your genetic instructions and actually assemble them in a way that serve you and serve the people around, because we are social beings. When you grow local food, you expect and you can enforce a clean environment, and you have a common goal, the well-being of the community. And this was Weston Price's, two of the quotes that you will hear most often. Thank you. One of them is that life in its fullness is Mother Nature obeyed. And the other is, it said his dying words were, you teach, you teach, you teach. You share this information and practice it yourself. So I thank you very much for being here. And yeah, stand up and wiggle, because somebody else is coming in next. I think it's Judy Mikovits. Thank you.